Make a good job, please.
I'll try. Okay, so I'll present now, as you mentioned, Dr. Francesco Petrini, who is a co-founder and CEO of SensArs. Dr. Francesco has a Ph.D. in neural engineering from the University of Campus of Biomedicina in Rome. He also performed scientific clinical studies while working at École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne in Switzerland and ETH in Zurich. He's part of the Innovators Under 35 list from MIT in 2019. And thanks to his innovative ideas and collaboration to create SensArs, he has won multiple awards and grants in the past years, such as the Venture Kick. And with this introduction, I'll pass you the microphone.
Okay, thank you very much. Campus Biomedico, you almost got it right. That is very complicated for non-Italian people usually. Thank you very much for this nice introduction. So let me go share. Here we go. So when you walk around and you step on an obstacle, usually you use your leg for feeling what happens at the interaction with this obstacle. You have the sensation of touch, you have the sensation of proprioception, of movement of your leg. Because of this, you manage to not fall. Now imagine you do the same. You step on an obstacle, you do not feel anything. You cannot interact with the obstacle, you risk falling. This is what happens when you're a person with a lower limb amputation using a prosthetic device. This happens because commercial prosthetic legs that are available today do not give any kind of sensory information to the users. At SensArs, we develop a new brain-computer interface to restore lost extremities, touch and movement sensations to people using a prosthetic leg. Because of the lack of sensory feedback, as I just told you, amputees risk falls. They cost up to $40,000 in the 6 months after the event. Because of the risking of falling, leg amputees using a prosthetic device do not trust the prosthetic device. They start over-relying on the healthy leg. They structure an unphysiological walking. This produces both a body and a mental fatigue. Amputees decide to not engage themselves so much in walking and often abandon their prosthetic device. This has complications on the long-term using of the prosthetic device that can cost to healthcare up to 250,000 euros per patient. And also for prosthesis manufacturers, this is a problem because they see revenues that are reduced. Finally, since there is not anymore a physiological connection between the extremity that is cut and the brain interprets that as pain from the leg is not there anymore, which is called phantom limb pain, which in the States is estimated to cost up to $30,000 per year. We have developed the solution to all these problems, SENSY, unique worldwide device restoring sensory feedback to people using a prosthetic device. SENSY is constituted by a sensorized insole, which is placed under the prosthetic foot. The information from the insole is delivered to an external controller, which is, do you see the video as slow as I see it? Here we go. An external controller which delivers the information to an implantable stimulating system constituted by electrodes implanted transversally into the nerve and a stimulator. Then nature does the rest because the signals are conveyed from the nerve of the subject to the brain, and the patient, the person, is able to perceive what happens at the prosthesis. Yeah, the video didn't work. I'll show it in another way later, Marco. The core of this innovation is a novel concept of an electrode that is implanted transversally into the nerve, that is easy to implant for the surgeon, and that is mechanically reliable over time. It is easy. It is constituted by two portions. One of them enfolds the wires, inside needles. The surgeon takes the two portions, clicks them together on the nerve, and then the surgery is done. The beauty of our technology is that for the way it is structured and it is designed, it can be applied to several indications. Not only sensory feedback restoration to leg amputees, but also sensory feedback restoration to hand amputees, sensory feedback restoration to people with a neuropathy, for example, a diabetic neuropathy, people affected by neuropathic pain, and the control of internal organs, electroceuticals. We have 2 patent applications covering the concept of a sensory feedback restoration device and our new concept of electrode. But this is not science fiction. We have tested this technology. Stanislas Popovic, one of the organizers, made a nice presentation a few days ago about this matter. We've done a first proof of concept with a prosthesis manufacturer leader, which is Osur, and of course, ETH of Zurich. Data from 3 patients showed that by restoring sensory feedback, you increase the perception of the prosthesis as part of the body, you treat phantom pain, you reduce the risk of falls, increase mobility, and reduce fatigue. We had a couple of nice publications to show the validity of our data and the feedback from both patients and doctors. Patients were thrilled. They were finally feeling the prosthesis as if the prosthesis was their leg after many years from the amputation. And the doctors were declaring that if the benefits of this technology were proven on a larger scale, they would have adopted in the future the product. But this is not only a benefit for the patients, this is an opportunity for hospitals, which can implement sales in a way similar to the business model of pacemakers. Prosthesis manufacturers, the limitations of prosthetic devices are solved, so they can opt to sell more prostheses. And for healthcare and the insurances, because they can see the cost for falls or sedentary lifestyle or phantom pain to be decreased. In our business model, we make the product and we sell either to prosthesis manufacturers, which resell to clinics, or directly to clinics, which implant in patients, which are supported by healthcare systems or insurances. We have top players in the clinical side, in the industry side, that want to collaborate with us and implement our business model together with us. We have several research partners of the caliber of ETH of Zurich, EPFL of Lausanne, this Institute, Scuola Superiore Sant'Anna, University of Belgrade. And thanks to the structure of the company, so far we managed to receive more than 10 between grants and awards from Swiss and European institutions. In terms of the market, the prosthetic market was estimated 1.2 billion in 2019. About 460,000 devices are sold every year. What we want to do is selling to those people that are using the most advanced prosthetic devices, the ones in which hopefully one day patients can hope to actively control their joints. This will leave us and address a first addressable market of about 250 million. Today, there are no companies that are developing products for the restoration of sensory feedback to leg amputees. That are eventually, though, companies that are doing interfaces with the peripheral nervous system for different applications, mostly pain. Those applications are electrodes that are implanted outside the nerve. Even though these electrodes are easy to implant, they do elicit a sensory feedback that usually is not perceived as the most natural. And anyway, there are not extensive studies in which they have shown huge clinical benefits for the leg amputees. In 2014, we made the first proof of concept during which in one hand amputee implanted with electrodes transversally into their median and ulnar nerves, we restored sensory feedback from his prosthetic hand for a month. After that, we proved the longevity of the electrodes, so the functionality for 6 months in hand amputees and rats. the benefits, the clinical benefits for leg amputees. And thanks to these achievements, we collected seed grants, we built our team, and we made our IP portfolio. Next milestones will be finalize an industrial prototype for going through preclinical validation in animals, validation and verification tests, clinical trials to gather all the evidences for certification of the device and product launch by 2023. The team is constituted by me, who was introduced nicely before, again, Ph.D. in neuroprosthetics, MIT Innovator Under 35, more than 2.5 million euros raised in awards and grants. Alain Garcia-Nuño, business development, serial entrepreneurs, raised more than 50 million in equity money. Dan Merrill, ex-clinical officer in several neuromodulation companies. John Boone, who has more than 36 years experience in IPG development and medical device development. We have a list of incredible advisors. The two co-founders, Stanisław Raspopovich, together incredibly engaged in the work of SensArs, and Silvestro Micera, both neural engineering professors. Charles Karinen, the ex-CEO of Bionics, a company that was sold to Octobot in 2017, and Professor Bumbasirevich, who did together with us the pilot trial on leg amputees. Now, what you've seen so far is the first exercise that you guys would have to do in case you decided to jump from academia into the world of startups. What you see here on the background is what it's called a business canvas. It is a graphical representation of a business model, which is the majority of what they will ask you to prepare, which is a business plan. Since there are tons of courses on this matter, I decided to not give you a lecture on this kind of things today, but I decided to show you already what it is, the exercise that I need. I decided instead to leave you with a couple of key observations, tricks, takeaways that I basically learned on my skin from the last 4 or 5 years of work with SensArs. First of all, build a team that you like, that is strong. What do I mean? What do I mean by strong? You need to have skills that are complementary. I know that in academia, this is what we've done also. In academia, you have your colleagues and you like to put together the background of two people that are from research. But in the case, you really miss the one that is going to do the job from the business. So one of you guys will have to learn. So what I can suggest is that you create from the very beginning an heterogeneous team in which you have different skills and different people can do different things. You share similar vision of what you're going to do in the future, of how you manage things, how you execute things, and credibility. If you add on top of this thing that I just mentioned, a CV of a person that is already a key opinion leader on certain matters, for example, the technology, or for example, the business, you have already, when you go out discussing your business, someone that will say, you know, guys, this technology is believable, this business is believable, put some money, why not? Proof of concept. You need to have shown that your technology a little bit works and that there is a business behind it. So you need to have a little bit of a validation from someone that can be a patient, that can be a doctor, if you're talking about medical devices, or someone that is already in the kind of business. Of these 2 points that I just mentioned to you, I would suggest actually to do it while you're still in the lab. The reasons are very easy. You can, at the same time, not necessarily invest so much money because you can use research collaborations. And also, you do not have to worry about creating a legal entity, which brings with it some aspects such as accounting, declaring taxes, lawyers, etc., etc. And finally, once you've done all these things, you're ready, basically. You're ready to spin off, start looking for some money while you're still in the lab. That can be really, really helpful. You can start with grants. It is amazing to see that the European Commission has allocated, as it did for the last 5-6 years, for the next 5-6 years, money for innovations spent for industry, for private companies. I was understanding from this nice conference organized by Marco and Stani that also in North America, the structure tend to be similar. So use that in the beginning, so you don't need to start giving away your shares, and after that, go engaging with investors, start growing at a pace that the market will require. A very last important thing I want to leave you with is the validation. I've been looking at some of the presentations these days, and yesterday I was also one of the judges in the brain competition. I see that many of the works tend to have that idea of focusing on the work itself without having verified whether the work can be of help or use for a patient outside, for a bunch of patients outside, for a bunch of doctors outside. So whenever you decide to structure work, and eventually you have in mind not to be always in academia, but to give something to the rest of the society and eventually drive into a startup or a company, always go out and validate what you're doing, whether what you're doing is of interest for someone that is outside. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you very much, Francesco, actually, for this very nice introduction. And I think you captured very well your role for the day, getting an idea to the students on how you have your great idea. You have done a lot of research about that. You started publishing about that. But the thing is, now you want to become an entrepreneur. So what are you going to do? And there are boxes that you need to check, and thank you very much for going through that. Now I'm hoping we will see some questions from the students. I get so for the general public, you can write that on the Q&A tab, and then the questions are going to be read for you to the presenters. For those that are in the video, we can actually let you speak. Carolina?
Yes, so I think Marco C has a question.
Ciao, Fra.
Ciao, Marco. I don't see you.
Come no? I put my video. So
let me do this. Here we go.
Okay. Fra, I just wanted to make a question or perhaps a comment on the very last thing that you said, because, I mean, obviously this is the industrial panel, right? And it's important about the validation. It's exactly true what you said, that you have to have in mind the fact that it needs to be useful. But wouldn't you agree that we should also promote completely useless science?
That's an amazing question. I was actually hoping that you made that kind of question. Me and Marco had this conversation quite several times. Yes, I totally agree, but it depends on what we're talking about. So there are two different researches, and you know this very, very well. There is fundamental research and there is translational research. There is fundamental research that is useful for translational research. So as far as you have fundamental research or fundamental research that is useful for translational research, of course you need to do things that eventually do not in principle or intuitively make any sense, because you need to discover something new that can eventually boost the curve of innovation going farther in the future. But when you're doing purposely and specifically translational research, I do not see why we need to put a burden on patients and, for example, develop an implantable technology and ask a patient to spend 6 months with an implantable technology that we do not know a priori whether a doctor will use that technology. That to me is, I don't know, wasting the life of patients.
Yeah. Thanks, Fra.
Thanks, Marco.
Right. I think we have a question from Olivier, if you want to ask it.
I don't hear Olivier.
Me
Do you guys
neither.
hear?
No. Okay.
I'm the only one, or the...
Oh no.
I go ahead and read his question. So if you start out the project in your lab, doesn't the IP belong to the university?
Bravo, that's an amazing question. You're right, Olivier, you're actually right. This is one of the notes that I actually decided to discuss or to not discuss. At the end, I decided to not discuss it clearly. Yes, the reply is yes. However, NIP costs nothing, only in the very first submission, to what is called a provisional. A provisional, it is you submit, you're protecting your idea for the date of when you had that idea. As soon as you move from the provisional, which is again remarking that you had the idea that day, you start paying, and you start paying a reasonable amount of money. So either you have already a project in which you have some money, or you decide, you and your co-founders, to invest a certain budget. I don't know, you need to invest for covering in the first couple of years the IP, probably 20K. So either you decide to invest already that amount of money, or you say, okay, in the beginning I don't want to spend the money, and I allow the university to have a little bit of shares on my company. In the very long run, what's going to happen is that, but for certain exceptions, I've heard of some universities really exaggerating. Maybe also our university exaggerated. I don't know. On that, we could discuss with Andrea Biasiucci. But the idea would be to return back the money in case the business is successful, back to a university for doing the better for the society, because the university is going to spend that money for running other projects, for creating new innovation, for allowing other startups to make another successful product one day in the long run. So it depends on your vision. At the very end, it really depends on your vision. Actually, you just gave me a pass for another thing I wanted to say. Clearly, the giveaways that you just took from my presentation, the 3-4 points I gave in the last slides, those are a recipe that I shaped all over the years that applies eventually for me and my team. That recipe, again, doing carbonara is something that everybody can do in a completely different way. So
I disagree.
No. Let's start. Let me finish. Then we start that one. But the recipe that applies for me may not apply for anybody else. So of course. And about the carbonara, I allowed myself because we're in an international environment. So it is true that everybody makes it in a different way. Clearly, in Italy, carbonara is a serious thing, as Marco is writing down there, and it has a very specific way to do it. Sorry, Marco.
Biasucci has a question.
Yeah. Hello, Francesco. Hello, everyone. So my question is, since you are talking about starting up business during research time, and that's one of the questions we should get all the time, but if you could go back to your student days with the experience you have now, what it means to start a company, and then, I mean, the toll it has on your personal process, what would be the advice you give yourself back then that you can then transfer to the students?
I don't know if you read it among the lines in my slides. Basically, I've said it. I think that the greatest difficulty that me, Stanisha, Silvestro, well, mostly me and Stanisha, because that me and him were the people that were mostly involved in the very beginning. We had a very similar background and a very similar experience. So at a certain point, I was noticing that, I don't know, the ideas that I was having and the ideas that he was having were pretty similar. And we were really missing the viewpoint and the skills of a business guy. I was the one that had to go into, you know, taking care of a little bit of the management of admin, taxes, and understanding how to prepare a presentation for a business model. Stani helped, of course, but you know, he would have had to do the same exact process. So modify yourself entirely for entering into a different mindset. As you can see, I'm still alive today. I'm still running. I'm still obtaining things and achieving milestones. So it worked. But maybe we could have gone a bit faster. Maybe it's you know, you cannot know. But maybe we could have gone faster if we had, in addition to all of us, also another person with a different background, giving us a different viewpoint on certain aspects.
Carolina? Oh, I think okay, so I'm gonna read a question from Beatrice. When Francesco say you have to invest $20,000 at first, what is the range of expenses that you're including in this? And is it like, are you trying to say something like you're minimizing your expenses, or this is like there is a lot that you could spend at the very beginning so that you're in a very good position to start with?
No, actually I was reporting about our experience. We had one patent, and we went for a provisional, and then actually we went for the Swiss application that played as a provisional. Then we entered into a European phase, and we were using a Swiss lawyer, so a Swiss advisor for doing that. If you sum up together, and the Swiss application entering into the European application, and the advices from the Swiss consultant that was shaping for us the patent, more or less this is what we spent. Over time, so since the very beginning, you can decide, for example, to spend less for your consultant.
Carolina?
Yeah, sorry, internet was weird. So I'm guessing you answered the one with
the one from Beatrice, but you can pick one from the Q&A.
Oh, okay, sorry. So there's a question from the public. Did you start developing sensors while still being paid by your lab, or did you just give up your salary for the first years?
Well, it's a complicated question, in a sense that in Switzerland there is a very smart system. What do I mean by that? There are a lot of facilitation for startups, little grants, which you need to get, and through which you can give the salary to yourself. However, the majority of those grants are grants that are given not to you directly, but to either a PI in university, either to the university, which at the end of the story gives it to the PI. So what was happening was that since I finished my PhD, me, Stanisha, we had collected money through these facilitations. The money were going to the lab, and the lab was using their money for paying me, for working a little bit at the activities of the lab and the startup, being the activities of the lab in coherence, let's say, in synergy and agreement with the activities of the startup.
Okay, and then there's another question which is more a little bit technical, but they want to know if you use machine learning in your core product, for example, iterative optimizing the feedback to the nerves.
Well, this is something that we haven't done yet, and it is actually something that you could ask with Stanisha Raspopovic. He would have a lot of fun in replying. This is something that we have started to insert into European projects and grants of every sort and kind. It is the future. So we want to actually start implementing AI into our system to make a further personalization of the sensory feedback for the user. At the moment, our algorithms want to replicate what the peripheral nervous system would do, but there is not an AI or a personalization at the moment.
Right. Marco B also had a question.
Thank you. So let's talk about, like, you clearly did some very successful clinical trials, and how can you plan? Like, I imagine actually that the strategy of SensArs would have been absolutely different, for instance, for the strategy of Abbott in terms of clinical trials. Like, you don't have a department that is dedicated to that. You have yourself, you have your scientific collaborators. And clinical trials are really expensive. Like, we're talking about invasive devices. How do you plan and handle that on these? It's a long term, right?
So the real reply would be that I haven't done the clinical trials that Abbott would do. I have done pilot trials that were meant to demonstrate the feasibility of our technology. Our first ideas were to prove that intraneural stimulation can work on humans, then that they can stay for a subchronic period of time, then that they can provide clinical benefits to the users of the sensory feedback restoration device. For arriving to having an approval for this kind of trial, pilot trial, you do not need a tough documentation as the one marking. Usually, when people mention clinical trials for among the brackets, and people have been exposed, general public, I would say, have been exposed to this reality because they are now hearing about the phase 1, 2, 3, 4 of the COVID vaccine. I'm imagining people are being more exposed to that matter. But when you do a clinical trial for getting a certification, then you really start spending the money. Not necessarily on the clinical trial itself, because on there, what you need to spend for is the surgery itself. You need to pay the doctors. You need to pay the doctors for following the patients, and you need to pay for the technology itself to be used. The majority of the money you spend for preparing the documentation for arriving to the approval for that clinical trial, what it is called in my slides, validation and verification tests. Those are tests that cost much, also because you need to produce many devices. And with that evidence, finally, you can enter into the clinical trial for the market clearance. Another very common source of money spent in the framework of clinical trials is when you're collecting data, you've arrived to 20 patients and you see that the indications you have guessed do not work. So, so if that happens, you're screwed because you're not gonna deliver what you promised for arriving to the certification. So you have to go back, insert new indications, recruit new patients, prepare new devices, pay the salary of people for additional months, and here you go.
Thank you.
Right. Marco C also has a question.
Maybe this is also to help a little bit the students who want to enter in the field. Although you said it in the presentation, but just to stress it perhaps more, like you showed a slide where you have a lot of seniors people now. How important is it for a guy that starts a startup to seek for seniors in the advisory board or even as member of the startup? And when should they do it? Like, should they do it like right at the beginning or should they wait?
You're right. Thanks for that. Actually, I didn't stress this point so much. Again, I mentioned the team. I mentioned the fact that in the very beginning, it could be very useful if you create an heterogeneous team. So a team with people that have different skills. I mentioned the business side and the technological side because those are the ones that are really taken cold into the cause in the very beginning. But what I indeed didn't mention is the fact that other skills and other knowledges can come from advisors. So from the very beginning, if you do manage, because you're convincing, because for example, you've developed a certain validation from the technological and business side, so you have a certain amount of technological ideas and business ideas, you've talked to a couple of doctors, you've talked to a couple of patients, you've talked to a couple of investors, what happens is that those people are actually the people that can decide to become interested in what you're doing. And they offer to provide you with suggestions simply because they want to follow up the project, because maybe one day they want to ask you if they can be engaged into the project itself. So this is something that happens all the time. And they give you, now probably the missing information here is what are these other skills we're talking about. There was a nice presentation that Marco sent me for preparing to this talk, which was showing a house with the funding and the management was missing, but the funding and the management I would put at the base of the house of the medical device business. And then the pillars, the columns were development, certifications, regulatory, reimbursement. Those are all aspects that when you're out of academia, you do not know anything about in no absolute way. So if you can have someone indicating the path, that could be very much useful. Because that is useful indeed for understanding what are the resources you will need one day when you will have to ask the money to investors, for example.
Awesome, thanks, Fran.
And there's actually a question a little bit with that, like how much do those advisors and board members cost you?
Well, at the moment, the board, we do not have, we are, well, en français, ça serait SARL, Société à Responsabilité Limitée. In English, Low Liability Company. Here we go. So we still do not have an actual board. We do not get decisions through a vote, through a board. What I've showed you are advisors. The advisors at the moment are people that are involved into the project. They're either shareholders, so they have shares, either they're interested in what we're doing. So they talk to us, they talk with us, they shape things with us because they want to do it. The people of the team, you're asking me, what are you asking? You want to know the salaries? The salaries can be high. But I'm not gonna, for privacy, I think it's not a good idea to actually share the amount of money I pay for them.
Right. Okay. And okay, then one last question. Do you, Francesco, prefer teams with a mix of highly specialized people to work with, or for example, people with good neuroscience background with engineering or programming expertise can add value to your team?
It's a very general question. Let me be politically correct first. So first of all, you want to have the team that is composed by the CVs that will fit with the tasks you need to execute. So if you need to make a sensor riding sole with a firmware, you want a mechanical engineer and a software engineer. That's what eventually you want. in general, what I like to work with, if this was the other question. I think I said it a little bit in the presentation. I think that the best is people that share the same vision you have. So people with which you think the management should be done in a certain way, people with which you think that in the next 5 years you should do more or less those activities, people with which you agree on the way you deal with the people are in the team.
Okay.
Maybe I want to like sort of wrapping up, since we have like 1 more minute. What is your take-home message for the day? If you want to leave like this this promising future neuroscientist, neuroengineer with a message from Francesco Petrini to carry for the next years when they're gonna possibly make their startup and start in the same path that you've taken a few years ago.
Well, the most important take-home message, again, I said it before, validate. That is really something that in academia is missing. This is what we discussed with Marco before. But if I can leave with with a philosophical sentence, never give up, because tomorrow will actually be better. Tomorrow will actually be better. So just continue trusting that, because it will actually be better.
I was so sure that you were gonna say, if you are thinking to the startup, don't. But fortunately you didn't.
I didn't.
It's a message of hope for everyone. We have actually a motivational talk in the morning is always the best.